What up, guys? So last night I had a conversation with my buddy Brandon Reed. He was jumped on our podcast, and he just won East Coast Trials, ADCC East Coast Trials 2025. And this idea came up on the podcast that came up with one of my students the other day who is a small business owner. And it's something that's come up in my experience as well, right? And that is when someone tells you, "Oh, must be nice. God, you're so lucky." Right? So I'll tell you where I'm coming from with it. So last week I was talking to my student, right, who's a small business owner. He's an electrician, bought this company, right? So he bought his company back in 2006, right? Late 2006, took a second mortgage out on a house that he basically built with his own hands, and then, leverages it to buy this company. So he's strapped for money, okay? About a year and a half later, the whole housing market crashed, the financial crash, the whole damn economy crashes, and a lot of his business got taken away from him. Meanwhile, he's still got to pay for the money for this business, and he's got a young baby, and he's got a new wife, right? It's a hell of a lot on your plate. And so, he was in a moment where, to be frank, his nuts were in his throat, right? Just constantly just on edge, working his tail off, trying to make this damn thing work, right? Now it's almost 20 years later, and he's in a situation where he can kind of make up his schedule a little bit. So he comes in and he's super consistent with his training, and we're talking about it, people going, "Oh, it must be nice to be able to train in the middle of the day being a small business owner," right? But what was funny was 20 years ago, people were like, when things are getting tight and he's like strapped and he's stressed and everything else, they're like, "Yeah, that's just the way it is if you're a small business owner," right? So on one end, it's like, oh, it's the small business owner is the problem. But then when things are going well, it's like, oh, well, yeah, it's easy for you. You're a small business owner. You make your own schedule. Must be nice. And then Brandon Reed was on the podcast yesterday, and he was talking about it, how, every time because he's been to the trials. This is his fourth time, right? Like the old saying goes, fourth time's the charm, right? The first time he went in 2022, then 23, and then 23 again, like East Coast, West Coast, and then he finally won the East Coast Trials here in 2025. And so he's been there 4 times. And it's funny because anytime he loses a match, someone will say, "Oh, yeah, he's just a wrestler." You know what I mean? Like, he's not really a jiu-jitsu guy. And they'll rag on him for that reason, right? But then when he wins, like at this particular competition, he won, and he obviously used his wrestling because he's very good at it, but he did a lot of other jiu-jitsu and leg lock defense and back takes, everything else. People were like, there were a couple, not many, these are all the haters, right? But they're still haters. So, "Oh, well, he's just a wrestler. I mean, he just went out there and did takedowns and stuff. Like, he's not a real jiu-jitsu guy. Like, easy for him. He can just go take everybody down." So he lost because he's a wrestler, and he won because he's a wrestler and he can take people down, right? Like, must be nice to be him. He's so lucky. It's such a mess. And I've had the same situation in my own experience. I've had that with the small business owner thing. That's been used against me before, because when I was struggling back in like 2010, when I'm sleeping on an air mattress that deflates in the middle of the night and I'm laying there, I remember some of my buddies like, "Oh yeah, man, like you dropping everything to do that MMA stuff. Good luck on that," right? And then now, when the roles reverse, I remember seeing a buddy of mine last year. He sees me. I've got a few things going on, doing all right for myself. And he's like, "Man, must be nice. God, you're so lucky." I'm like, "Lucky? What do you mean lucky?" Right? In all of those different cases, there was no luck about it. I mean, sure, there's a bit of luck. We're lucky to be in a certain circumstance, but a lot of it was just digging in and having to eat shit a little bit, right? I remember with the YouTube channel, I remember like talking to a guy. I was at his gym, and we were talking about some business stuff, because a lot of times I like doing that. I find that stuff fun. I like talking to other business owners because I've learned a lot of stuff over the last decade of how to make this thing work. And one of the guys was like, "Yeah, it's easy for you to say because you got the YouTube channel." I'm like, "Yeah, but I didn't always have it, and you can build these things up." Like, and so what I'm getting at here is that there's this, I don't know what it is. It's not something I remember existing when I was younger, right? Because when I was younger, like when you saw someone do something, you would look at it and go, "Hey, there's a model to chase after. Let's do that." Like, maybe I'm not going to do exactly what they're doing, but like there's some clues there. There's some things that maybe I could take from that. But there seems to be this ever-growing sort of drive to be like, where you see someone that's successful, you see an anomaly. Right? Whereas I feel like, for me, I don't see an anomaly. When I see successful people do stuff, like there's a formula there, and I want to crack it open. Like when I talk to people who are successful, I like to ask them all kinds of questions, because I'm like, what do you got that maybe I could use? Because there's something in there, right? Or go back and like with like a Brandon as an example, you could go back and watch the evolution of his game over the last, 3.5, 4 years and see him get better. At least I have, right? I've been able to see him get better, and you can see what's changing. And so the idea here is very simple, right? Don't let that thinking invade your mind. When you see someone successful that's doing something that maybe you want to do, instead of going and having that reaction to say, oh, well, must be nice, it's easy to be you, you're so lucky, all that sort of unresourceful, unuseful, defeatist sort of mindset garbage, like talk to them, ask questions, study them, figure out how they got to where they are. Because again, I just see this over and over again, and I don't know, it was an idea that I was chewing on. I share it with my Chew Crew subscribers. They seem to enjoy the email, so I wanted to share it with you guys as well. And it's fresh in my mind after talking with Brandon. So anyway, that's the idea to chew on, guys. I'll talk to you next time.